What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a guide to getting the most out of your animal companion in Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. So obviously the game launched very recently. I had a lot of Mythic Pass stuff I wanted to do, but this is a video idea that I'd been kicking around for a while. I kind of thought about ranking the animal companions, but then honestly I haven't used every single one of them because there's a lot of options, and I figured the best place to start, and maybe eventually work my way to actually ranking all of them, would be to start by breaking down again, how to get the most out of your animal companion, because there are a lot of things you need to understand, even if you're coming from Kingmaker, in order to use them effectively. So things like your animal companion's ability scores, multiple attacks, how do those multiple attacks work? What is their base attack bonus? What are the size modifiers? How does that relate to mounted combat? Obviously, a lot of stuff to talk about there. So we're going to kind of break this down and get into it. For starters, what animal companions can we actually pick? Well, the options are bear, boar, dog, elk, giant centipede, horse, leopard, mastodon, monitor lizard, smilodon, triceratops, velociraptor, and lastly, wolf. The first thing I would recommend doing before you even pick an animal companion is know exactly what you want to do with that animal companion, because they are highly customizable in this game. You can use animal companions in mounted combat. They can actually take up several archetypes of sorts that we'll get into here in a little bit that will allow them to do different things, such as be a better mount, get combat maneuver feats and things for free, depending on, again, the archetype you choose, things that will affect their speed. One of them, Death Touched, even makes your pet heal from negative energy, which is basically making them undead. But actually diving into this, when you're picking your animal companion, a few important things to look at. For starters, size. Size is important for two reasons. One, in order to use a animal companion as a mount, your character has to be one size category smaller than your mount. Most characters in the game are medium. That means, typically speaking, you're going to need a large size mount. However, if you're playing a halfling or something that is small, you can then use a medium-sized mount. So the size at the top there, obviously very important. Speed is fairly important too. This is how far they can move in one round. There is an archetype that increases that a little bit as long as they're not wearing armor. But while it's important to know, I wouldn't let speed be the be-all, end-all factor for you, as most of them get roughly the same amount of movement. I believe the raptor actually gets the most with 60, but most of them either have 40 or 50. Now, in addition to speed, we get our AC, where we see their plus whatever natural armor bonus. Everybody's base AC is 10, plus they get a natural armor bonus on top of that. This is going to be plus whatever to your base 10. So for instance, the bear has a plus 6 to natural armor. That's actually going to make it a 16 base because it gets a 10 base, then plus the 6. And that gets a little further complicated by the barding in the game, which we'll get into here in a little bit. Now, in addition to this, probably the single most important thing to consider when you are picking your animal companion is what kind of attacks it will get. That said, we will get into attacks and how they work for your animal companion here in just a little while down the road. Now we have our ability scores as well. Couple things to keep in mind here. One, those ability scores are going to change typically depending on either 4th or 7th level, which is usually told to us right below this. This is typically speaking the levels at which an animal companion will grow in size, which will of course change its stats. So it's important to know what those are going to be, and also whether or not your animal companion uses dexterity instead of strength, because some of them will actually use dexterity instead of strength just as a base. For instance, the leopard will. That's important to know because, of course, our attributes for our animal companion are something we can mess with a little bit as they level up, but again, we'll talk about that soon. But it's important to just know what your animal companion's ability scores actually are. Strength and dex, for the most part, are the most important. Constitution's a little bit important. Intellect, wisdom, and charisma I wouldn't really care at all about at the base amount because obviously our animal companion's not going to be using those anyway. Now that brings us to the slightly more interesting stuff. We've decided of those factors what's important to us. We've picked our animal companion. Now when we get it, we're actually going to have to give our companion an archetype. And because of that, when you first get your animal companion through whatever means, it will have a level up symbol, even if it's not actually leveling up. It's just giving you the option to set its archetype, as well as name the thing. Now, the archetypes for the animal companion are Aggressor, Bully, Bulwark, Daredevil, Death Touched, Racer, and Wrecker. Now, overall animal companion archetypes are fairly straightforward, but it is the same for all of them. And these will all do various things. Aggressors get extra damage, Bully gets some free combat maneuver feats, Bulwark gets extra barding and stuff feats in exchange for the animal companion evasions they normally get. Daredevil loses multi-attack at level 9, which is a common thing for them to lose actually. Multi-attack in this particular game actually just reduces the penalty that you get to your extra attacks. It doesn't actually give you more attacks. Death Touch, like I mentioned earlier, gives you negative plane stuff, which lets your animal companion heal from negative energy, again making it basically undead. There's Racer, which gets extra speed as long as it's unarmored, and then Wrecker gives you Sunder armor in exchange for some stuff. So some cool archetypes to choose from for our animal companion. Again, the key thing here is knowing what you're going to be using your animal companion for. For instance, if you want a heavily armored mount for the sake of mounted combat, you might want to pick Bulwark because they get their barding feats for free, which means you don't have to spend feat points on them. And we'll get into feats and things and why that's important here shortly. But next up on our slow animal companion creation, we have our skills. Now, skills are easy to mess up for an animal companion because you have to understand something. An animal companion's not going to use most of these. There are 3 that I would recommend, and there are several that you should never give it. For instance, use magic device and persuasion you should never give to your animal companion because it's never going to do those things. Now, class skill, they're usually going to get athletics, mobility, stealth, and perception. Now, these are actually all pretty much the ones I would recommend. And simply put, this is because your animal companion can actually perform those skill checks for you out in the world. So if your animal companion is the highest athletics, mobility, or stealth even, for something, you can in fact use it for those skill checks. Personally, I like to go stealth and then something else. That way you can use your animal companion as a scout forward and then perform either athletics or mobility checks on top of that. Now I would tell you putting points into any other skills for an animal companion just wouldn't be worth it and would frankly be a waste of points because they'll never get the option to use them or they simply won't be very good at it. Now, next up we have our feats. It's important to understand with feats one thing in particular, and then we'll talk about something else. When your animal companion gets the chance to increase its attributes because it's leveling up the same as you, so at the appropriate times you can increase an animal companion's attributes by 1 point here and there. While it's not 100% mandatory like you have to or anything, you might want to consider giving your animal companion 1 point in intelligence from its base, which is 2. Because the move from intelligence 2 to intelligence 3 actually opens up a lot of feat options for your animal companion. Things like, for instance, your teamwork feats actually require intelligence of 3, and then you can give those just as a base to your animal companion if you're not running a class that gives animal companions those feats anyway. But in addition to that, when it comes to feats, there are very much so wrong choices for this. Because again, we're talking an animal companion, we're not talking a player character. This is where also, knowing exactly what your animal companion gets for attacks is very important, because you can give your animal companion feats like weapon focus and things like that, and other sort of feats that actually let them focus on one weapon. However, they're going to be using their natural weapons, so you want to give them those feats for the weapons they can actually use, which is their natural weapons, which is things like bite, hoof, that kind of thing. Now, exactly what this is, of course, changes on our type of animal companion, and what type of attacks they get. Alright, so let's circle back and talk about the attacks now. So when it comes to animal companion attacks, you have to understand a few things, and honestly, just about how your character's attacks work as well. So even though we know certain animal companions will get extra attacks, it's important to understand that that only happens on a full round attack, provided you have the base attack bonus to give you those extra attacks. So what does this mean? At level 1, basically every animal companion is only going to be able to make 1 attack per round, until they get the base attack bonus to give them their extra attacks. However, just because you have a high enough base attack bonus to give you extra attacks, which is like 6, 11, and 16, I think. Not levels, mind you, base attack bonus of 6, 11, and 16. But once you have that high enough base attack bonus, you still might not necessarily be making all of those attacks per round, because you're only going to be getting all of those attacks with that animal companion if you are making a full attack. So if I have an animal companion that gets 3 attacks, it has the base attack bonus to use those 3 attacks, I still have to use a full attack round to actually get all of them. Now this works the same way for characters, actually. If you move and then attack something, that's all you get to do that round. You can only attack once and also move. That's an important thing to understand, again, especially with animal companions, because it shows these attacks that they'll get right when you pick the animal companion. You need the base attack bonus to get all of them, as well as a full round attack to actually use all of them. So when an animal companion first moves to attack an enemy, that first round, it's only going to get one attack because they also moved that round. Now, all that basic stuff out of the way, I want to talk about a few other specific things. One, equipment. This is new with Wrath of the Righteous. You can actually equip your animal companions with items, only certain slots though. For instance, they can all wear a belt, they can all wear a back slot. There are bardings you can find throughout the game, which your animal companion has to have feats to use. These are honestly the same as every other type of armor, except they're for your animal companion, which means they're subject to a dexterity limit or AC bonus. What this means is that armor limits your dexterity, which can limit your dex to AC bonus. If you're unaware, your dex modifier also gets added to your AC when you're unarmored. Armor actually limits that by a certain amount, and barding works the same way. So if you have a barding that, say, gave you 4 dex bonus, that means the maximum bonus you could get to your AC from dex while wearing that armor is 4. Whereas if it's 0, that means you don't get a dex bonus at all. So something important to understand there. But lots of stuff with equipment. I do want to mention one thing. They can wear a necklace, and that's actually pretty important because amulets of agile fists actually do also affect natural weapons, which will give your pet a bonus. So even if you're not using an unarmed character, you might want to save those amulets of agile fist. And then last but not least, and honestly a pretty important part of this, your animal's effective level. So this is important because your animal companion doesn't level up on its own. It is tied to the character that it belongs to. Some animal companions operate at a -4 to their level, just due to where they came from, and then in other cases, it might be slightly different because you put points into a class that did not give you an animal companion. What does that mean? Basically, your animal companion will only be the level that is associated with the class that gave you the animal companion. So if I'm, say, a druid and I took an animal companion, and then I put a point in fighter, and I might be a level 2 druid fighter. However, my animal companion's still only going to be level 1 because my druid's level 1. So it's important to understand your effective level for your pet because this will show up as bonuses or minuses to their stats. So if you're ever mousing over your stats and you see animal companion bonus, animal level bonus or something like that, that's because of the effective level of your pet. Now that can be offset a little bit if you get the boon companion feat on your main character that is associated with the pet, of course, because boon companion will actually give you I believe it's +4 levels on that animal companion to match whatever the class it is that gave it to you that's kind of fallen behind. So it'll basically make your pet keep up a little better if you do choose to multi-class a little. There you go, guys. There is basically everything on the basic level to know about the animal companions. I certainly hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.